It's 5:30 a.m. I am ready for tomorrow, July 4th, so that I can sleep in. Let's make some coffee. Woo! That is some good needed coffee. Let's start the day. If you're ever in Santa Monica, Dogtown Coffee has some of the best burritos. Steak burrito is the one I like, but they have a bunch of different options. My wife was gracious enough to go grab this for me this morning, and I am grateful. Getting a workout in over lunch break. Definitely recommend, find time, get a workout in. Compound lifts, always lift to failure. 2 pieces of advice today. Let's talk about the Canon now. All right, workout's done. So what we're gonna do now is take one of these lenses actually to FedEx so that we can ship it back. While we're on the way there, let's talk about the Canon EOS R. If you guys haven't seen this backpack, I'll post a link to it. I did a review of it, the Low Pro 450. Awesome bag. Great for camera gear, travel, anything. So let's get out there and I'll see you guys. All right, so I forgot my sunglasses. Let's start off here in the shade. I want to start by talking about lenses. So we originally got the Canon 16-35 f4 because it had image stabilization. You guys saw from some of those videos, I'll show you examples now, but it was really jittery. So although the IS definitely worked when you zoomed, when you looked farther, like at the 35 range, turning it on and off, I'll show you examples here of that. It does do a good difference, but I really don't think with video, especially vlogging style where you're walking and there's heavy steps underneath you, it just didn't do a good job. So that led me to want to try the Sigma for 2 reasons. The Sigma's a 14-24 f2.8, so it gave me 2.8. It was only about $300 more, and it also was 14, so my thought was I could maybe use it for vlogging. However, when you look at this example clip here, it was still a little bit too tight. I really think you need a 12, and at that point, you know, 12-24 f4 isn't that attractive of an idea. That being said, the Sigma produced a very nice image. I was really happy with the image out of the Sigma. It might even be better than what we're shooting on now and what I finally landed on, which is the 16-35 f2.8. So this seemed to be the balance of kind of everything coming all together. What this ended up doing was giving me enough weight. It's about 0.3 pounds heavier than the f4. And that really, for whatever reason, even though it's not stabilized, seemed to do enough stabilization so that when we're shooting, when we're walking, there was just kind of minor shake. It's not that bad. I have to be careful of how I'm stepping, but at the end of the day, it definitely worked out well. So right now we're on the 16-35 f2.8. I do recommend this lens. If you're looking at the Sigma as well, that's definitely a good option. All right, so that brings us to the comparison with the Sony A7RII, which I'm coming from. At the end of the day, I don't doubt this, the Sony is a more technically adept camera. It's just the technology inside of it. It does 4K without a crop. It's got a great sensor. It has in-body stabilization. It's better. The best way I can equate this though, I've had such a good time on this Canon shooting with it. At the end of the day, it feels like if you were talking about baseball bats maybe, the Sony's this bat that's made out of some type of metal that you know when you connect right, it's gonna hit the ball farther every time. However, the Canon, the way it feels, the flip out screen, the ability to see myself, seeing the focus, seeing the lighting, having the built-in ND filter, it feels like that kind of weathered bat where you just know you're gonna have a good grip on it and you're a little bit more confident using it. So they're both really good cameras. It comes down to what your specific needs are. I don't think it's comparing apples to apples, and I do stand behind the fact that I think the Canon image is definitely something pleasant to it. There's something special about it, which the Sony doesn't have. That being said, the Sony is crisper to me. It takes really good 4K, it compresses it well, it does a great job too. So I love having both of these in my toolkit. it's tough to recommend one over the other. It really comes down to what your use cases are. So if you're doing landscapes, if you're doing real estate, I'd probably push you towards something like the Sony. If you're doing portraits, if you're doing something where that kind of artistic flair comes a little bit more into play, I'd probably recommend the Canon. In terms of video, if you're doing vlogging like this, hands down, honestly, the Canon's better. The only downside that I see out of this right now is the fact that I do have to shoot in 1080p, but I have found it's a really attractive 1080p. If you're doing things like filming in a studio, if you're doing overhead shots, maybe tech reviews, the Sony comes into play really good. If you can be behind the camera or if you can set it up, make sure it's in focus, let things roll, the Sony's a really good camera for those types of scenarios too. So they each have their pros and cons. I think the next iteration of both will be really interesting to see. Does Canon end up coming out with something that's a really high resolution camera? Is it something that's more video focused? That A7S III, A9 II, those are gonna be really intriguing as well, and I'm looking forward to those. All right, so stabilization. I've realized at the end of the day, specifically for vlogging, that it really comes down to the weight and electronic stabilization. The in-body stabilization, the lens stabilization doesn't really seem to do that much from all the examples and tests I've put things through, and I think that's why Sony's never really been that good with it. They're lightweight, and they have in-body stabilization, they don't have electronic stabilization. So with that combination, it's just not gonna be that good. That also makes sense why the Sigma did so well, why this 16-35 f2.8 does so well, and why the f4 that had lens stabilization does not work. So I think at the end of the day, if you're going for vlogging stabilization, you definitely want to get a heavy setup and something with electronic stabilization. If you're going for photography stabilization, if you're going for kind of zoom stabilization, that's really when both the lens and the in-body is going to come into play. All right, so would I recommend the Canon EOS R? At the end of the day, for anyone looking to buy a new camera, if you can, I'd say wait out. Wait for the next announcements. I'm sure late 2019, early 2020, they hopefully will announce the next version of the EOS Rs. And if they don't have that 4K crop, unless you're very photocentric, it's tough to recommend this camera. I plan on upgrading. I know a lot of other people that have this camera that plan on upgrading. The 4K crop is a serious problem. So it is super hot. I was gonna get Subway, but Tasty Delight? Acai bowl? I think so. All right, so there's three last things I wanna cover before we end the review, and next up is battery life. And quite honestly, I've been really impressed. So all of today's film you saw, and that includes all the scenes I filmed that didn't make it into the final cut, we still have 4 bars on the battery, so it's still showing essentially a full charge, and we've been recording a lot of footage. Really big thumbs up there. Seems to have great battery life. I do have a spare. I always have a spare just in case with any camera I get, but really good job on the battery, Canon. Next up is usability, and this is something where I think Canon's done a really good job, and I wish Sony would take a few notes. The actual menus themselves were very clear. It's very quick and easy to understand where you need to go to change certain settings, but all the major settings that you need to do, you can really do from the touchscreen or right on the main interface itself. So I really like that aspect. Things like changing the gain levels, for example. You can actually do that right from the main screen, changing which shooting mode, whether you're shooting 4K, 1080, 1080 30p, or 1080 60p. Again, that's all done on the main screen, so you can actually see what you're filming kind of while you're doing that, and it's very quick to get to those settings. So big thumbs up on usability. That's where I think they definitely have an edge up, and I find that's very usable, especially in these vlog type scenarios where it's kind of fast paced, you're trying to change settings on the fly, and you want to make sure they're ready to go as fast as possible. So last but not least, let's talk about focus on this camera, and I think my initial impression stood true, is that it seems to do a really good job specifically around video use cases. Again, I think the Sony maybe has a little bit more futuristic technology, especially when it comes to photos, but right now I can see that my face is in focus on the screen. I can actually see that it's locked onto an eye. I can see that it's a specific eye. I think they do a really good job, and it doesn't necessarily jump around or grab my hand and hold onto my hand for a while. That being said, you saw early on in this vlog in the morning, especially in low light, it has some trouble kind of figuring out what to focus on, and it does bounce around a little bit. So still room for improvement there, but overall I have been pretty happy with the focus on this camera. So that's gonna do it, guys. This ends vlog 4. By the time you're seeing this, it's the 4th of July. So if you're in the US, happy 4th, happy Independence Day. Tomorrow, I think we've got a parade. We've got fireworks, obviously, a lot going on. So I think it'll be more of a vlog style. Sorry, I'm falling out of the hammock here. So as always, guys, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you on the next one. Look at this mooch.